Greetings viewers, if you click the video link, you're here to learn how to disassemble and or reassemble your KRISS Vector. This instruction should apply to both the 45 and 9mm versions. This particular one happens to be in 45. It is also an early generation, so some of the features may be slightly different, such as the way that your stock may attach. But I'm going to go ahead and cover the way this one works, and you should be able to easily ascertain if that's going to work for you or not. So anyway, first things first, we're going to safety check our weapon. I've already made sure there's no ammo or magazines anywhere in the room where I'm at. Visually, physically inspecting my mag well, there is nothing in here. The bolt is locked to the rear. I am looking visually and physically inspecting my chamber. I have no rounds in there, so our weapon is good to go and we are ready to proceed. So I'm going to go ahead and send the bolt forward. In order to make this easier, keep everything in frame, I'm going to go ahead and take the stock off first. So in this particular instance, again, it may be different than yours. I'm going to push up on this little pin, pull this out, set it to the side, depress the button here, which is going to release that kind of clip that goes inside, and then this just pulls free. Your version may have a Picatinny rail or some other attachment that's going to hold it on there. It should be fairly simple to understand how to remove. So we have 4 pins that we need to remove to disassemble this thing. We've got 1, 2, 3, and 4. The way that I am currently looking at them may be different than yours. They may be reversed. It does not matter which way these pins go in, whether it's from the left or right. We just need to know which direction we're going to push them to disassemble. This is not the right side, so we need to flip it over. We should be looking at kind of a hollow pin with some little spring retention clips on there. So we're just going to push these pins towards the opposite side, and then we're going to flip it back over. We're going to pull the top ones out first. Again, set these aside. Go ahead and get up underneath the heads of these. Set those aside. I have a tape switch that's Velcro to this foregrip, so I'm going to remove that. You may or may not have that set up the same. Now, the lower and upper receiver should break apart. I'm just going to pull in 2 opposite directions here. So this is our upper receiver. Of note, this is not the serialized part. This is just a polymer frame that houses your fire control group, your safety trigger, your selector switch if yours comes equipped with that. There is nothing else to disassemble from here. You should be able to access everything that you need to clean for this portion. So we're going to set this aside. This is our lower receiver, which is the hefty part. It houses the bolt, the barrel chamber, and this is the serialized part for the weapon. So now that we've removed those pins, this entire assembly should just pull straight out of the bottom. So there should be no other moving parts in here. Again, you now have access to your chamber, the rails that your bolt assembly rides on, your mag well. You can get to all of this to clean it, your barrel so you can run your bore snakes, your patches, or what have you to get that clean. And then we've got our bolt assembly here. So as it sits, the bolt should be in this configuration where it's sliding along this little rail section here. If we kind of tilt it up and give it a little twist, we're only going to turn it 90 degrees, pull it straight out so you can see where this kind of little T-shape kind of locks in there. So we're just going to break that free there. This piece can be cleaned. This is that recoil buffer that, again, travels downward to help mitigate some of the recoil. And then here we have our bolt. The bolt does house the firing pin here, and it also has the extractor right here towards the top right portion as it's in the firing position. All right, so for the last step, I've got the camera zoomed in on our bolt here so you can again see the firing pin sticking out through there. So what we're going to look at doing is removing the extractor, because again, I stated that I was having issues with it. I know others have as well, so if you were needing to access that to either do some sort of repair, maintenance, or part change, we're going to look at how you take the extractor out. Now, again, this is the way the bolt would be sitting in the firearm. So this is the top, this is the bottom. On the right-hand side where the extractor goes here, you can see there's a little teeny tiny hole there, and it is at an angle that goes over to this big side here. So the pin is tapered that we need to get out. So it's imperative that we go from this direction towards this direction. You're going to need a super tiny punch. I have a 1/16 here, and I've got my little armorer's block. Just kind of find a way to kind of wedge it in there so that it's in a position you can get to it. We're going to get it at just the right angle so we can knock it from the smaller side to the big side. Careful, pay attention. That shot out of there. Luckily I saw where it went, so you can easily lose that. So make sure you have some sort of shield here to keep from losing your part. I'm going to put my thumb over the extractor here and pull back on my punch to get that out of there. It's going to relieve some of that spring pressure that's pushing back. And we're going to open this. And we're going to open this up, and you can see it's kind of all gummed up and gross in there, but we've got our extractor removed. And our extractor spring. So that's open and available for us to get in there and clean out any gunk. And again, make any replacement changes or do any fixes that you need to do. All right, so I've got everything cleaned up. We are ready to reassemble the extractor spring. So all we're going to do is the reverse order of everything we just did. So if we look at the channel here where our extractor sits, there is a little circular cutout in the bottom down there. That's where we want the base of this spring to sit with that little plastic plug. We're going to drop it right down into that circular little notch. And then if we look on the back side of our actual extractor, we've got a very similar circle right there that is going to need to encapsulate the top of this spring. So we're going to just match the shapes here. And then you're going to notice that obviously the holes are going to line up where that pin came from. Now the easiest way that I have found to do this is I'm going to take that punch that we used to remove the pin, and I'm going to actually feed it from the right to the left, and I'm going to squeeze. I'm pinching this right now to help keep it together so I can get that hole lined up. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually feeding that punch through there to kind of hold it in place, because this thing can be kind of a pain in the butt if you're trying to squish it and wiggle that pin in there. And so what I will do is I will now back this punch out just to the very edge, so it's just barely holding on, because again, this pin does have to go in one way. And then what we're going to look at here on this pin is you should be able to see that this end of the pin is flat and this end is sort of domed a little bit. So if you look really close on yours, you should see the same thing. So what we're going to do is that domed end is going to be the one that we push that punch out of the way with. So I'm still going to keep my fingers pinched here on the extractor. I'm going to get the pin lined up. I'm going to pinch really well, and I'm just going to push that pin and drive that punch back out. So if you can't quite get it, what you can do is you can just kind of take your mallet and tap it in there. And what it'll do is it'll drive that punch out again, since it kind of saves space for our pin here, and then just kind of do your best to wiggle it back in there. You can then also turn around and use that same punch that we just took out. And then we drive that pin all the way back into place with the same punch that we used as a placeholder. So our extractor is now replaced. All right, so now that we have our bolt reassembled, we need to actually put the bolt assembly back together and then put it into our lower receiver here. So the first step we need to do is you need to look at it and again, make sure you've got it in the correct orientation. I have the lower receiver laid out as it would be. This is the way that the bolt is going to lay in there. The extractor should be on the right side of the weapon. If we look at the shape of this, you'll also see how this is going to line up in here. If you try and put it in there, the holes are not going to line up. So that should be a nice guide for you so you know where you're going with this. So we're going to do the reverse of what we did before. We're going to turn this 90 degrees so we can get it down into this section here. We're going to then spin it so that it is now captured within the little rails that are there. Now, I'm going to stand this up so you can kind of see a little bit better. There are two sets of rails here. There's a one towards the rear and there's one towards the front. You should be able to make that out in here and see those two different sections. Now, on this right here, there is one piece that goes towards this rear, and then the nubs for the bolt itself are going to go into the forward one. So the easiest way to do this is to stand it up on its head like I have it. We're going to drop the bolt into that front groove. While lining it up, you need to make sure that not only the front nubs, but the rear nubs for the bolt go into that same front notch. And then we're going to kind of shimmy it a little bit, and this is going to fit in that rear notch. And then after After you get it in there properly, it should just slide in without any issue. There shouldn't be any back pressure. There should be nothing fighting you. If something's not going, then something is wrong. Back it out and try and wiggle it in there again. So your bolt should be lined up in the correct orientation with the chamber. Because again, if we look at the way it functions here, and this comes down, that bolt is traveling towards the bottom of the weapon. So now we've got the bolt carrier group reinstalled. We can now reassemble our two halves here. One thing you can do to help yourself out, because we don't need it for anything else, you can go ahead and throw this bottom front pin in, and what that's going to do is that's going to hold this whole assembly together to keep it from falling out. If you're having any issues putting it back together, leave this one open because we needed to access that. So what we're going to do, I'm going to make sure my tape switch is out of the way. You may or may not have to worry about that yourself. Make sure that the hammer is all the way to the rear and that the weapon is on safe. Go ahead and slide these pieces together, and then all three of these holes should now be lined up, so we can go ahead and retrieve those pins we used earlier to disassemble and go ahead and put those back in place. So we've got all 4 pins reinstalled. Only thing left to do now is to reassemble our stock. If we look at the holes back here, obviously this thickness matches that. If you try and put it on here this way, it's not going to work. So we'll go ahead and squeak it in just like that. I'm going to go ahead and put the pin in first. Before snapping it down, I'm going to go from the top to the bottom. Just wiggle it. You may have to wiggle it a little bit. And once it pops into place, you can then lock your stock in the open or fold it into the closed position. And then you can just do a function check, make sure you reassembled everything right. If you followed this guide properly, you should not have any issues, and your firearm should be functioning the way that it was when you disassembled it. If you replaced your extractor spring, then hopefully it's functioning a lot better than it was before you disassembled it. So hopefully I covered everything that you needed to know about disassembling and reassembling your KRISS Vector. If I did not answer anything, you still have some questions, or there's something you think I didn't cover, please feel free to leave me a comment down below. I will be glad to get back to you, respond to any questions in text comment form, or if I need to, I will be glad to make a follow-up video or short to answer any questions you may have. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and call it here. Hopefully you found something useful in this video. Thank you for watching, and we will catch you in the next video.